All right, let's kick it off. Lyndi, I don't know if you're gonna tee us all up. I see the comments coming in. If not, I'm happy to get started.
Happy to. So everyone, we're joining this conversation today after the announcement of the acquisition of Indicative. So for the folks joining, I'm very excited to introduce you to these three folks. What we have today is an informal, kind of energetic conversation for you, where we prepared a couple questions for these folks to talk through, but feel free to join in and ask your questions as well. MK is our CEO and co-founder of mParticle. Chee Chew, who has been here leading our our product organization. He works very closely with Jeremy in this acquisition, and Jeremy is the co-founder and CEO of Indicative. So I will hand it back over to you, MK, to kick us off.
Awesome. Well, I guess we'll dive right in. I'm sure everybody wants to know, first and foremost, why did we do the deal? I'll kick off, and then love to hand it over to both Chee and Jeremy. I guess before I do, first of all, again, I've thanked these guys many times in private, but let me do it once more publicly. Super excited about the opportunity and couldn't have got to this stage without a ton of hard work from Chee and Jeremy and a bunch of folks on both of our teams. So awesome to be here. First and foremost, why we did the deal is to be more customer centric at the end of the day. If we aren't aiming to always improve customer centricity, probably aren't solving for the right things. Next, for me, it really came down to people and to technology. So the people are awesome. I've known Jeremy for many years and have a ton of respect for what he and his team have built over at Indicative, and it's an awesome platform. Speaking of the platform, I think that's probably like what most people are excited about. I think that there's an opportunity to combine Indicative with mParticle to get the best of all worlds and ultimately help customers accumulate better data as well as better context around that data. So for me, kind of three main points. So with this kind of Cambrian explosion of data, it also means that there is an equivalent explosion of experimentation needs and requirements. In other words, like data by itself isn't enough. It's really like how it's applied. Two, new technologies, new solutions, the combination of mParticle and Indicative should help teams go beyond just doing old things better, right? So there should be an element of like 1 + 1 = 3. And then lastly, for me, I think today the market benefits data products that offer a combination of application logic, middleware, and a data store or a database all combined. So as we got into the discussions, for me, it became clear that we had complementary views of the world and also really a shared vision. So mParticle as the data layer to help teams improve data quality, data governance, connectivity. Indicative as a really rich data exploration tool, which has a rich legacy in terms of building on top of the data warehouse ecosystem. So combining the CDP world with the modern data stack to help teams get to truly like a best in breed approach. And I think like there's obviously been a lot talked about and a lot written about over the course of the past year or so, where I think people think about those two worlds as opposites, two opposing forces where one wins and one loses, and it's this zero-sum game. I tend to think about those conversations a little bit differently. It's usually more complementary rather than having kind of these like two opposing forces. Combination of fast pipes and slow pipes, CDP, modern data stack, system of record, and system of movement. All of these things not only can live together, live in harmony, but they should, and they do. And at the end of the day, you ultimately get to a better state where we're able to deliver more adaptive, more personalized customer experiences. So I know that was a little bit long-winded, and I'd love to turn it over to Chee and Jeremy, but feel free to share why you're excited about the deal.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be happy to jump in. Speaking from a little bit of a perspective than Michael, being from on the acquired side, what really resonated for us and our team were the fact that our goals and our visions were really aligned. mParticle's vision around shortening time to value of data. Our goals are always been around helping companies build better products through data, really sort of fit together. If you zoom up, they're really around how do you allow customers to realize the value of the data that they are generating in an easy and quick way. Where Indicative has been really strong is around the conversion analytics side. Where we haven't been great is around data and data governance. And so, the combination of these tools really combines in the way Michael described is 1 + 1 = 3 in terms of the whole being greater than the sum of the parts, really resonated with us. Secondly, culturally, I've known Michael for a long time. Chee, I'm getting to know more now. So there really is a shared company culture and values around how we think about supporting our customers that really resonated with us. And at the end of the day, this allows us to continue to build on our strengths in a way that we weren't able to do independently. And so, the net here is I'm excited for what the future holds for both of our customers in terms of driving more value for them.
Yeah, excited about the partnership too. I'd love to just jump into some of the functionality and the vision that you had for it. When I think about some of what people do with our products is helping understand your customer base, understand cohorts and the different levels of engagement that they have, and what helps take someone from one level of engagement to another level of engagement. And oftentimes that's done in terms of like, here's an audience set, and we want to take them to a higher tier. And one of the things I really loved about the product that you had was how people often say, what's the thing? Like they think it's one answer, but what you've shown is like it's not always one answer, and you'll actually help people identify the multiple paths that people take, and help people personalize in a better way, not just thinking of it as cohorts. Could you just talk about like how that works and what led you to that, what the vision of that is?
Sure. So, in order to sort of tell that story, I have to take a little bit of a step back. We started Indicative really out of necessity. Prior to Indicative, I'd started 2 other companies. One was one of the first dating companies in market, and the other one was one of the first enterprise CRMs for mobile. I mentioned that just to sort of emphasize the fact that we are generating huge amounts of data, both in terms of how our customers are interacting with their platform and the ancillary services that we are using, our billing, our marketing, and so on. We're generating all this data. And looking back sort of 10 years at this point, it was really challenging for us to be able to do anything with that data. We actually had to build our own data warehouse. We had a MySQL instance that we ran on leased hardware, and we needed to enable our product teams and our marketers to do something with that data. This is before there were things like data scientists and those types of terms. And what we essentially had was our engineers who could be allocated either to product or to analytics, taking time out of their day to help build reports and understand what was truly going on under the hood. When we looked in market, we didn't see any tool that allowed our teams to be able to democratize data. So what you're describing, Chee, in terms of providing that level of flexibility, of exploration to non-technical users to be able to understand what was happening in those customer journeys, what was happening that was driving those outcomes, why were people converting, why were people churning? And the truth is we really just rolled something in-house. My background is I was the CTO of those 2 businesses. I'm an engineer. We just built something in-house, and we realized that while we had built something that was incredibly ugly and not pretty to look at, it was incredibly powerful in that it impacted and allowed our marketing and product teams to conduct their own analysis. So we eventually took that concept and started Indicative with the vision of allowing non-technical users to be able to understand and analyze the customer journey without the need for things like SQL, without the need for things like Python or R, or really dedicated technical resources. And what you're describing around understanding the nuances of the customer journey is really what our tools are enabled to do. You can do some of these analysis maybe with a Tableau or a Looker, but the difference is you need an engineer or a data analyst to build those reports. And that takes time. That takes a week, 2 weeks. If you want to understand the nuances between 2 points, it requires going back down to that notion of how that of the SQL or the script or so, and how in turn that analysis is built. Our vision was to allow people to ask those questions, hundreds of them, at their fingertips in a day to inform the decisions that they're making. And you described this, I think, nicely in the sense that there isn't one answer. There's usually many different types of questions that people have to ask to inform a hypothesis. And so in our platform, we have built a suite of tools that focus on things like path analysis, understanding the different paths where users are taking. So for example, what is happening between a starting goal or a starting objective and an ending objective? Maybe just ending objective, understand the attribution towards what paths are people going down to arrive at a certain outcome. Tools like user segmentation, build complex behavioral audiences that allow users to understand that as a group, whether it's activating them or using that in subsequent analysis. Where we really are strong in terms of our competitors is around the conversion analysis. Conversion analysis is typically thought of as, what does a user do between step A, step B, step C? The reality is truly understanding conversion is much more nuanced. There could be step, A1, A2, A3. There could be multiple paths. Different nuances in terms of how users convert depending on your funnel. For example, a great example that always resonated with me is funnel analytics in e-commerce. Understanding if someone converts across a series of steps is interesting. Understanding in a checkout flow, for example, if someone converts with the same product in their checkout cart is a very different example. So there's a lot of nuance to that we're really good at. And then the last 2 areas are really around who are these groups and who are these users. So understanding cohort analysis at a very deep and granular level. And lastly, being able to drill down specifically into individual users and their individual timelines is important for coming up with sort of a macro thesis around what users are doing inside of their products.
So I love that direction, that future, and the reason why we had talked about this for mParticle is kind of how we think about the evolution of the CDP world and answering these questions for businesses. Like when you're taught early on, you have these questions you want to answer, and you're looking to do data science to answer these questions. One of the things that you're taught early on is, okay, you have to think carefully about the question, obviously important. And from there, you have to think carefully and pick the right data to analyze, because you can't analyze everything. And so you have to be really on target as the right data to bring in. And I think the way that we see the world going is, as things get smarter and smarter, we actually want to open the aperture. So you don't need to be as precise with picking the exact right data, but with the CDP having access to all the customer data and these advanced systems, we can actually help advise and help figure out what is the right data set to bring in. And we can show insights that people may not have otherwise realized. This is where we want to go together. I think the opportunity is huge for us, and we're just starting.
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on this point also, which is around understanding this notion of data maturity as well. So for example, in the early days of Indicative, we would spend a huge amount of time helping customers just clean their data so that it's presented properly and that it knows what it means and it's governed properly. Data governance, I think, is one of these words that comes with a lot of baggage, or at least in my mind it does. People think about data governance and think of bureaucracy, they think of big companies, they think of, we're not ready for that yet. But as we sort of take a look at the way the ecosystem is maturing, to get good use out of your data, to make smart decisions, the notion of governance is so important. Having that data be clean, understanding what it means is no longer something that companies have to think of only when you're a Fortune 500, or no longer when you're an 1,000-person company. These are now things that companies that are two guys in a garage should be thinking about from day one. It doesn't have to be this sort of like big bureaucratic thing. And that helps reduce this notion of time to value. It's much easier when you know that your data is in good shape when you're doing that analysis, rather than spending the majority of time during analysis trying to pick out the signal from the noise because your data isn't clean.
Yeah. So I guess like hopefully this all kind of makes sense to everybody watching and listening. Can we maybe make it a little bit more concrete? Like, when, in your experience, does it make sense for teams to bring indicative into their organizations? Like, have you guys found that there is like a point in time? Is it like something happens? What's the straw that breaks the camel's back, so to speak?
So the joke I like to make with this is the best time to bring in customer analytics into your platform is yesterday. So literally, it's the same thing if you're an entrepreneur, right? The best time to start a business is today. If you're launching a product and trying to figure out your go-to-market, if you're trying to figure out product market fit, I actually don't know how you do that if you don't have the ability to understand what's going on within your product. If you need to iterate, if you need to pivot, every company pivots, right? If you're Coca-Cola, I had this conversation this morning, you're always pivoting. Having data is the critical tool that you need to be able to think about what's going on, what you need to change. So when I talk to companies, I say, if you're not thinking about your data day one, you're already sort of messing it up. And data visualization, product marketing-based analytics is really like the language that we all speak, or it really is the tools that we all use to inform decisions around what we do in our roadmaps, in our marketing, and having the ability to democratize that across an organization, right? Not just with a data team, not just someone who can write Python or R and is an expert at SQL and Tableau, but across the entire organization, really allows companies to live up to this notion of simply being data-driven. It's not something that is only companies who have reached a certain level of maturity can have access to. It's really something that almost every company should be thinking about, if not, have today.
Absolutely. So I guess, like in other words, to be data-driven is to be customer-centric, right? And so what other tools do you typically see as indicative starts to get adopted by your customers? Obviously, like, being built on top of the data warehouse, there's naturally going to be a data warehouse, but there's usually a kind of digital value chain, if you will, data coming from various places, data needing to go to different places. What's a common setup that you see?
So if we're talking about sort of the data warehouse modern data ecosystem, I think of it as sort of to the left and to the right of the data warehouse being at the center. There are tools you need to collect that data. So generating that data, collecting that data from each individual touch point of the customer, mobile, web, call centers, whatever, your Zendesks and so forth. Tools to manage that inside of your data warehouse. This is things like dbt and so forth. And then tools effectively to make use of this data, right? Like, one of the big limitations of the modern data ecosystem have been, we can store the data cheaply, we can collect it, but then what do we do with it once it's there? That has historically been the bottleneck in that ecosystem. So the solution to that has historically been, let's hire data analysts and data engineers to write code to do stuff with that. And the way I sort of look at CDPs today, and Michael, you touched on this a little bit earlier, the way I sort of think about product analytics, it's all about what you end up doing with that data to inform your product marketing decisions, and even further to actually automate or operationalize a lot of that data. And so, I think of sort of like the left side being collection, the middle being the storage and the organization, and the right side really being the activation of that data.
Mm-hmm. And I think, like, in your view, where do you see the opportunity for the two things to come together and be a creative, given that that kind of mental model?
Sure. So, this is something you and I have talked about briefly. I'm going to share my perspective, and I'd love to hear, Michael, if yours is different than mine, for what it's worth. But really, data warehouse is just another source of data, right? Like if you're collecting data and it's going into a CDP, wonderful. If you're collecting data and it's going to a standalone monolithic stack application, great. The big sort of, I think sort of FUD that exists in our industry is that there does have to be a single best approach to this. I really truly believe that data is constantly being generated and it's constantly going out to all these other different tools. The data warehouse is exactly one of those types of destinations around customer data. What's going to be interesting and what Indicative has really never been able to solve, maybe only up until recently, is how do you connect to that data? How do you then leverage that data and then ultimately do something with it? And so, if the question is, how do I sort of reconcile the universe in terms of CDPs, data warehouses, modern data ecosystem? Like the modern data ecosystem is about empowerment of companies owning their data. CDPs are about activating that data. How do you clean it? How do you activate it? And what do you do with it and bring value to that? And Indicative fits in there in very much the same way in terms of understanding what's happening in your data, being able to dive into it easily without a ton of knowledge or resources. It's what allows people to do things with that data. Because, something I always sort of talk about is pretty charts, visualizations, analysis. They don't exist for their own edification. They exist for us to be able to inform our decisions or to be able to literally activate that. No one builds a dashboard just to look at it because it looks pretty on their big plasma. People build these charts so that they can understand something, so they can do something with it to improve their business, to generate more revenue, to increase conversion, to decrease churn, and so forth. And I see CDPs, data warehouses, as being complementary in that universe. But yeah, love to hear your perspective on it.
Yeah, I think, and I know Chee has his perspectives too. So I think it's probably worth hearing from both of us. I think activation is a big part of it. Like at the end of the day, it is about getting data in motion. But to me, I think the thing that is lost on the industry, that's lost in a lot of these kind of reference architectures, is the key piece around like adaptability. Businesses are constantly in flux. The digital ecosystem is constantly in flux. The data that you need to track and tag is constantly changing. There's more data being created than ever before. Ultimately, there's more data being consumed than ever before. The privacy landscape is ever changing. How do teams deal with this constant state of flux? And I think that's where there's a good opportunity to combine the stability that you get from having a system of record or source of truth with a system like like customer data infrastructure, CDP, that allows you to navigate all of the changes that would otherwise force organizations to kind of devolve into a kind of state of chaos. Because like what we typically see is usually like we will come in primarily like after an analytics tool, like an Indicative, where there is a team who has a set of requirements to consume data a certain way, limited amount of data being sent into a tool, and then things are fine until they're not, and it's not fine usually as a result of the team being successful. People start asking more questions. They realize that they need to expand their aperture, right? They need to understand the world a little bit more holistically. People start running campaigns and experiments, and then they want to close the loop, and they want to get the output of those campaigns and experiments into a variety of different tools. And then other tools are added and more data is added. Next thing you know, you have this like Frankenstein's monster. And so that is just the natural reality of things. If you have this very rigid setup where things only kind of move left to right, things are moving left to right and back to left, and you have these feedback loops. And all of it is in the spirit of creating better customer experience and more personalized, relevant customer experience. But to say like I'm going to set up a very kind of linear approach where data moves in only one direction, I think like to me that's probably the biggest area of opportunity for teams to leverage the modern data stack and a CDP. But you know, Chee, I'm sure you have additional thoughts too.
Yeah, I think there's so much to do with you could do with the governance side and cleaning the side. But at the end of the day, data is like fuel for a company. And there's the one side that you have to worry about, like making sure it's safe, making sure it's refined, and all this sort of stuff. But like we want our tools to more and more help us do that, make that simple. So you can really focus on like how do you harness that and turn that into great action and decisions that help the customer experience. And what I think that we need to do together, and the offer that we have as a combined company, is to really help people go from like crude fuel to refined, safe, trustworthy, to then like turning into action, turning into decisions that really drive customer experiences. And I think that the partnership with Indicative will really help us do that.
Yeah, amen, amen. So what's next for the Indicative team?
Well, I think a lot of that is still being figured out in terms of where exactly our product roadmap goes. So I think, what would make sense is at some point in the future, it might make sense for us to regroup as right here is with these folks and talk about sort of what that roadmap looks like. There isn't anything changing immediately in the short term with Indicative to allay any fears that my customers might have. Indicative is still going to be there for you. We're not going away. And, we're excited to continue to invest and build better analysis, more smarter analysis, faster analysis to help enable our customers.
Great. Well, I think that may be a good break point to be able to start to take questions from the audience. I'm going to turn it back over to Lyndi to help moderate. And thank you, Jeremy and Chee, and looking forward to fielding some awesome questions.
Thank you, everyone. That was really helpful. So we've got a number of questions and hopefully have enough time. People have been very energetic. The first one is, how does this relate to the best of breed approach? Does this mean that you're replacing the mixed panel amplitude as a destination by integrating directly? Who wants to take that one?
I'll jump in terms of our intent, and of course, Jeremy and MK jump in. We're still very dedicated to the belief of helping customers choose the best of breed. The whole premise for us as a CTP infrastructure is to give people independence, data democracy, and also independence in terms of not having like lock-in on SaaS services. We also are very customer oriented in terms of going to where we see customers really wanting to go. And we've clearly have seen great demand for a tool like Indicative to help people understand the customers across the entire company, not just in marketing, knowing across the company and be able to look at the entire data set that we have in the CDP. And that's why I think it really makes a lot of sense for us to partner together.
Great, thanks, Chee. Here's a question from Jason. How will a combined offering change the way your clients create and manage their customer journeys?
I'll jump in again.
Go, Chee, go.
Yeah. Jeremy, I'd love to have your perspective on this because you see this as well. I think what we aspire to do in the shorter term, but I think this is going to evolve over the longer term, is people have their initial notions of how they conceive of their audiences, their cohorts, and the journeys that they have going along. And people always come in with those hypotheses. And what I think a tool like Indicative helps our customers do is to really validate and create insights. And you might realize that there's this other really critical waypoint that you haven't had before, and help you identify those key customer cohorts and target them and do the best for them. So bringing insights that you didn't necessarily have, validating your hypotheses, and then letting you build upon that. That's what I think that we'll be able to deliver together in the shorter term, and then just go from there.
That's great. Thanks, Chee. Bala would like to know if this is going to become a regular event. Are you guys going to keep sharing your insights and visions and thoughts?
I'm down.
You're down? Okay.
I love talking to these guys. Yeah.
Let's do it.
Okay, we're in. All right.
Yeah.
Well, that'll make Bala happy. I think so. Here's a question from Max. How does this impact current mParticle customers? Will Indicative come as a natively integrated part of the solution, or rather as a separate add-on?
Well, stay tuned. We don't have anything to announce quite yet. Obviously, we're going to integrate the products together and make the capabilities of Indicative easy for our customers to take advantage of and really help drive their business. But stay tuned for that.
Great. Jeremy, I think you answered this a little bit, but Benjamin wanted to know, as a current Indicative customer, but not mParticle, what can we expect to change?
I mean, really in the short term, nothing. Nothing in terms of it would be disruptive. Like, I think at the end of the day, like, we have a product roadmap that existed prior to this acquisition. The majority of that roadmap are things still we are rolling out. We are, in terms of sort of how we think about the future, there's sort of an integration roadmap with mParticle, and we also have our feature and value product roadmap as well. We still intend to continue to build out functionality that adds more value to our customers. We've historically been able to do that on a relatively rapid cadence. We're going to still push out new and interesting value-added features on an ongoing basis. We have some things coming out over the next month or two that I think will really resonate with our customers in terms of value. But really, for existing executive customers, the value you get from our platform is not changing, and if anything, it's going to be increasing as we are going from being a relatively small company to joining a company that's much larger with many more resources available to us.
Well, we're happy to have you part of the team. So thanks, Jeremy.
I think it's really important for us to affirm this on like both sides of this family now. Like we believe in the importance of Indicative continuity with our customers and having Indicative be a product that a customer can continue to enjoy and adopt. And we don't plan to like deprecate, remove, anything like that anytime in the foreseeable future.
That's great. Okay, this question comes from Adam. 5 years from now, in what ways do you think customer experience will have permanently changed because of better data strategy? I know it's a big question, not a softball. Sorry, Chee.
I mean, I'll take a stab at that one. I think a lot of data discovery today is sort of operator hypothesis based. It's limited mainly by users' imagination when they're sort of looking for that needle in a haystack. And the way I've always thought about Indicative, irrespective of mParticle, is the next evolution here is how can we be smarter about helping to find those needles in a haystack? How do you automate some of that insight? Because a lot of the problems that customers use Indicative for, they may be different sort of on the margins, but they all fall into sort of the same 5 or 6 little high level categories. And so, where we're sort of thinking about is, how do we make those things easier? How do we shorten the time to find those insights, those diamonds in the rough? Today, you have to come with an idea, a hypothesis, and say, well, let me go, whether it's running tests or just test analysis, from 10 different angles surrounding what that problem is before you reach that light bulb is really hard. So if I had to think about what sort of customer journey and discovery looks like in 5 years from now, I would certainly think that the time to discovery from an insight perspective has been dramatically reduced.
That's great. I personally would like that in the marketing department.
A mental model I would give you is like, imagine that you're a CEO right now and you have this great data team. And right now, if you're a great CEO and you have this data team, you'll go and ask them questions and you'll get great answers. And periodically, that data team will come to you and tell you, advise you, give you an insight that you didn't ask for, but was like amazingly meaningful to you in the business. I believe that infrastructure, like data infrastructure, will be able to do that. As we move forward, it won't just be a set of people who all do that, but the systems themselves will surface insights. And I think that that's what the partnership holds for us as we go along.
Yeah, and I think like we've at mParticle kind of long said that like there will be this natural evolution. So much of what we've been focused on with respect to helping teams improve data quality, governance, and connectivity has been as a result of this Cambrian explosion of data, right? So we've been in this data wrangling phase for really the past, say, 10 years, right? As the world has moved beyond single-threaded, web-only digital experiences, right? You have more data being created from more sources and a lot more volume of data, right? And so you got to wrangle it, you got to organize it, cleanse it, transform it where it needs to, and then make it easily surfaceable and connectable to all the different tools and systems and APIs that teams use. Massive opportunity just in that. Like those challenges aren't going away anytime soon. There's probably no finish line either. But the big opportunity has been, and like we're getting there, is to do something with that high quality data asset, to do more with it, unlocking insights, unlocking intelligence, unlocking automation, so that even the use of the tool, which is highly flexible and configurable, but more kind of rules based in its current state, can become more automated. And the people, our customers who use the tool, can be more strategic in their application of data and of customer data infrastructure for the end purpose of benefiting the customer, right? The end user. What should that be? It should be relevant offers and experiences that drive engagement and allow them to create relationships with people where they're adding value, right? Rather than kind of just transacting or maybe living in the friction, right? Like we see so much of the movement throughout the ecosystem, whether it's like under the guise of privacy or really anything else, it's created a greater center of gravity. And what it's done is it's also raised the bar in terms of the experiences that brands have to deliver to continue to maintain and improve their relationship with their customers. Because if they can't, people are like, we're all fickle. Like we're going to go elsewhere. We're going to spend our time doing other things, right? And so being able to answer questions better, being able to get data out of a single tool and across an ecosystem of tools, that has to be instantiated from the standpoint of what does it mean for the end customer, right? And that's why it's also really important to be able to solve for the adaptability piece. It's not just about saying, I'm going to start here and then go here and then go here. The world is dynamic. Everything is constantly in flux. How do you address that, especially when that complexity also increases exponentially with scale? That's the thing that I think teams are like, that should hopefully become easier over the course of the next 5 years if we are successful in implementing our vision throughout the industry.
Great. Thanks, MK. Well, I know we're starting to trickle down to a couple more minutes, so we have a couple questions. If there's any more that we miss, we will make sure to follow up with you directly. So I'll throw this one at you right now. You touched on this a little bit, but can you describe the current vision for integrating Indicative's functionality and interface from the UI UX perspective? How will this impact user journeys and workflows within mParticle's product and Indicative's product? Long question. I think you touched on it, but maybe packaging that up with a bow.
we'll circle back with more information about that. I think a couple of things to think from a philosophy point of view. One of the things we're tackling first is making it easy for existing customers to get advantage and utilize each other product. Both we want indicative customers to easily take advantage of the rest of mParticle if they wish, and vice versa. So our focus is first on making it really easy, and this also includes the audiences. So we would love for our existing customers of our audience product to easily be able to layer on indicative analysis tool and gain insights from the audiences that they have already created.
Great. All right, one last question, and I think I'll let people go to their next busy day commitments. So how does this change the equation in the industry-wide debate around what tool is the data stack should serve as the organization's source of truth? It's also not a softball.
Yeah, well, I mean, the source of truth conversation is always one that I find amusing, because you ask 5 different teams within any organization what their source of truth is, and you get 5 different answers. And each of those tools will probably claim to be a source of truth. To me, it's kind of like beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I do think that there is a strong opportunity, that being said, for data warehouses to be the kind of the system of record, the source of truth, whatever you call it. I think that makes sense for certain groups. I think, like, we see it certainly in our customer relationships. In many cases, the CDP is the source of truth. Like the mParticle ID is the customer ID inside several of our customers' organizations. So I think, like, there's a whole bunch of different ways to do it, but I also think, like, it is fine if mParticle or the CDP is not viewed as the source of truth, because a big part of our value proposition, as we've talked about today, is about getting data in motion and creating that system of movement, not just like the system of record. But that's just my view.
I'd say I agree with that. I'd say also, when you're talking about data marts, data lakes, raw data, enriched data, data that's synthesized through analysis for different purposes, like the question is a little bit more complex than a face value of it's one place and everything has to go off that table and that's the answer. It just doesn't work like that in practicality. I do think, I agree with what Michael says. I would say it slightly differently. It just, in terms of emphasizing, like, there's a right tool for the right job and there's a right source of data for the right purpose. And I think, like, answering that question, it has to be analyzed through the lens of, well, what are my objectives? Am I operationalizing data? Am I storing this for archival purposes, for governance purposes? Is this for marketing, for product, and so forth? And so, like, there's different ways to answer that question depending on what problems that you're trying to solve. What the wrong answer is to say there's one universal answer and that's the way everyone should do it. That's for sure.
I agree with you, Jeremy. Like, I don't worry about this question. I don't think about it a whole lot. And my belief is, in the modern world and the world we're moving to, the notion of a single source of truth is not really valuable. The real question is, do you have access to the data that you need? And can you really trust the data? If you think about this like one of our sort of technology systems, there's a cache in front of the source of truth for some of our systems. People are hitting the cache. Are they hitting the source of truth? No, they're hitting a cache. Does it provide them the data they need in the way that they need it, in the speed that they need it? They do. So if it provides the service they need, it doesn't matter. And that's, I think, what's important in the world, the way the world is changing in the modern cloud architecture.
Yeah, sorry, just to add one more thing. Like, I think about that also in terms of transparency. Can I deconstruct my data from one source to another to bring it back to another place? Is it transparent in terms of, when I look at an analysis, how the analysis is built? Can I deconstruct it to understand ownership of that individual data, or where that came from, or how it makes sense? That, that's a little bit more about when I think about single source of truth is it opaque? Can I see where that data came from, that analysis came from, that data point came from?
Great. All right, I'm going to add my own question to all of you real quick. What is the one thing you want the folks who are on the line to take away from this conversation?
I would say one, for existing indicative customers, what we have ahead, I think is going to be really exciting, and stay tuned. And I would say for mParticle customers, we're excited to bring you functionality that you haven't necessarily had access to, and that lots of exciting things are coming down the pike.
Chee,
Yeah.
do you want to go?
Absolutely. Just excited about the future together, and bringing the ability to really analyze, understand, and decide, make this great decisions on the data. Looking forward to building that world together, Jeremy.
Yeah, and I would just add, in terms of like one takeaway. I mean, it's, as I said earlier, it is all about being more customer centric, helping our customers, hopefully many of the folks listening today, be more customer centric with their customers. And so this is the first of, I think, many exciting announcements that you will hear from mParticle. Not to tease everybody too much, but we're excited about what 2022 holds for us and for all of you.
Great. Well, thank you all. Just for a quick reminder, everyone who's attending, this session was recorded. We will share it out. If there's any questions we missed, because I know we're actually a couple minutes over, we will follow up with you directly. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.